Hey, it's Zoe, and I am so excited to speak with you today. Well, it's mostly me speaking and you listening. I imagine it as a conversation. There is plenty to catch you up on today. I've just come back from my Larapinta Odyssey. Yes, I survived. Yes, it was amazing. And there's some pretty interesting insights I've taken away from that whole experience, which is what I'm going to dive into today, along with other updates like the Olympus Project, what's happening in amplifiers, and some key tips for you. So without further ado, on with the show.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
So I'll start with the most exciting. Everything is exciting. I need a better word because really I am excited about this. The Olympus Project, my debut novel, is back from the typesetter. So we are now scrolling through it, trawling through it, picking up as many typos and last minute changes as we possibly can. This is a long process. It's a long book. It'll probably be around the 400 pages mark by the time we get it printed. And it's arduous task to pay attention to the detail. I'm not good at detail. My husband is good at detail, and guess what? Rob is actually reading this one. He has agreed that he'll help me proofread, and he is currently trawling through it. He's gone through the first part of the book, and he's enjoyed it. So that's good. He actually likes the sections that I like the most too. And he gives me useful feedback like, no one says thunderballs, which was part of some of the dialogue. I'm like, I really like thunderballs. He's like, nah, it's not credible. No one would say that. I'm like, oh. So Thunderballs is out. I don't know. If you like Thunderballs, you think it adds something to dialogue and you think it should be in there, we'll do a little poll or something. Keep Thunderballs, keep it out, whatever. So that's part of the useful feedback I'm getting from Rob. And my copy editor is also going through it. So what happens from there is we send it back to the typesetter for those edits and they fixie it all up. And in the meantime, the audiobook is also in production. No, I am not narrating it. Oh my goodness, I don't think I could do that. It's such a tough job. There's so many different accents in this book, and it's a long book. And I thought reading people stuff for my audiobook was long. That was only 5 hours. This is going to be heaps longer. In any case, that's in full production. I'm reviewing all the chapters as they have them ready. In the meantime, we have set up a wait list for the book. So we will put a link in the show notes right at the top where you can click and just sign up to get the first announcement of when you can get advanced reader copy or the collector's edition. And that's before we do the major official launch on November 20th. Oh my goodness, this project is taking forever. And the other piece of news with this is I've actually written the first 500 words of the next novel. It was a big block for me considering I finished the first draft of the Olympus Project in January or December. Yeah, 6 months I haven't written anything new apart from the Olympus Project text. And so, anyway, it's kicked off. I've had the idea for the novel number 2, the sequel to the Olympus Project, bubbling away. So it's starting to come to life too. So that's all really cool. Get on the wait list for the Olympus Project. You'll get the special deals, all the insider behind the scenes stuff that we're including in there. And also when you do sign up, there's an invitation to become an ambassador. If you're really interested in knowing how publishing works and you've really excited about the book and what it can offer, then you can become an ambassador. And what does this mean in real terms? It means that you get an advanced reader's copy in exchange for giving an honest review when we go to launch. And I will share all the ins and outs of what's happening on the publishing scene behind the scene. So that's all on the website, and we will put the link in the show notes for you to click on, get on the wait list. All right, so that's the Olympus Project. Yay! All right, so Larapinta. I have wanted to do the end-to-end for a number of years. So I have taken a number of leadership groups out there on short 4-day immersive experiences, which have been fabulous. And every time I've gone out there, I've fallen in love with the landscape, just just found it so inspiring and amazing. The views are outstanding. It's just geology, 300 million years of geology laid out in front of you. And it's just got such a powerful force to it. It's just stunning. And I knew that the whole end-to-end would be magnificent. And indeed it was. There are some photos on my website. If you go to zoerouth.com, click under About Zoe, there's a What's Happening Now page, and that's got all the pictures that I've put up there. So if you want to have a quick squiz at the pictures, and yes, I will put that in the show notes as well. So there's 2 links straight up in the show notes. One is for the waitlist for the Olympus Project, and the next one is for the pictures of the Larapinta. It is stunning. So Alice Springs is right at the heart of Australia, if you're unfamiliar with where it is. And out to the west of that is the West MacDonnell Ranges, which were formed some 300 million years ago in an uplift orogeny event. Great word. We had so much fun with orogeny. And basically something happened underneath the earth, and it shoved up the earth into the massive mountains, probably they think as big as Everest. And over the ensuing millions and millions and millions of years, it eroded away and left these fantastic ranges. And that's where the Larapinta was. I went with Trek Tours, and they have Trek Larapinta and Trek Tasmania. And I've been on many of their programs beforehand. And it was pretty cruisy setup compared to walking it independently with your own pack and all your food. So the setup was walking with a day pack, and they had 2 guides. One would walk with you and the other one would do the logistics, which means they'd move all your kit, your food, etc. while you walk the trail. So all you had to do is walk with a day pack. Very nice, very good for my 52-year-old body and feet. Plus they did all the cooking, which was amazing. So all I had to really do was look after my own personal world of making sure I got up, dressed, and packed in the morning, especially when we moved campsites. We didn't move every day. I think we had about 5 different campsites over the course of 16 days. So the trek is harder than you think. You think it's flat out there. No, there was plenty of elevation and the trail was rocky. So my first insight was, oh my God, am I going to be able to navigate this with my feet? I've had problems with my feet for years, mostly nerve pain. And I've been to the podiatrist for years trying to figure out how we fix this. We fixed the first part of it through stretching the calf muscles. Yay. And then we introduced orthotics, which didn't fix the nerve pain. So essentially what happened, after about walking for an hour, I'd start to get this burning sensation in my underneath my toes. And it's because things are tightening up and the nerves get twangy. I had lots of great help from a palliative care nurse who was on the trip with me. And she said, take drugs. She said, use anti-inflammatories. They will help. And use Panadol because it also helps boost the effect of the anti-inflammatories. So I became a pill popper on that trip. 3 times a day I'd be taking anti-inflammatories, which caused reflux and other gut issues later on after 2 weeks of doing this. In any case, it seemed to help. I still got twangy foot, as I came to call it, in the later part of the day. Sometimes it would kick in earlier rather than later. The good news is I learned how to do hamstring stretches that relieved it. So the orthotics didn't fix it, the drugs didn't fix it entirely, but stretching did. The key insight, like, why am I telling you about my feet, I guess, is that in trying to manage my foot pain, and I also got lots of blisters, in trying to manage my foot pain, every day I'd be focusing on my feet, and I'd be thinking about how I'm walking, and I'd tell myself, tread softly, because I'd noticed that I'm a stomper. I had some feedback from one of my running buddies, Murray, who I was running with one day, and he said, wow, you make a lot of noise when you run. Your feet are just slapping the ground, thunk, thunk, thunk. And he goes, listen to me, I hardly make any noise. And he was right, he hardly made any noise, and he's much bigger than me. I'm like, why is it that I run so heavily? In any case, back onto the Larapinta, and I was like, tread softly. And I consciously focused on walking more softly on the trail to put less pounding effort onto my feet. And of course, the metaphor was born right there. I'm like, where else am I just hammering? hammering my thinking, hammering my body, hammering what I'm doing probably all my life. I think I have been a very determined, focused individual. And I think that sort of grunt has been with me for a long time. And it doesn't always serve. I think there is a lightness to thinking about treading softly. And treading softly also has an environmental aspect to it. If we tread softly on the earth, it means we look after the earth. But it was not so much about that and more about lighten up in some ways. Lighten up your thinking, lighten up your mood, lighten up your focus, and enjoy where you are more. And that was kind of a aha moment. A sort of ping, aha. Wow, what if I tread softly in other aspects of my life too? Take a lighthearted approach to work. Take a lighthearted approach to your novel instead of getting so serious about it needs to be a success. Don't make any mistakes. It's like, what if I tread softly with it? This lightness of being is something that I'm currently experimenting with. So that was my first, well, not my first, but one of the key insights I'm taking from the Larapinta trek. Another one was actually fear and the effect of fear. And the fear appeared for me twice on the Larapinta. The first one was right at the beginning. So the week before we headed out, I was so nervous. I was nervous, one, about my feet and my body. Would I be able to hack the day after day walking and ordeal? So I was really nervous about that because I didn't want to miss out on anything and I didn't want to hold the group back. So there was anxiety around that. And I was also nervous about meeting other people. Would the group be good? Would I fit in? Would I be ignored? Would I be appreciated? How would the group thing happen? Which is a very primal thing, isn't it? And the other element of fear was on section 4. No, was it section 4? Section 5? Section 4, maybe? No, section 5 of the trail. And we walk this 3 or 4 kilometers on the Razorback Ridge. Now, as you can imagine, the Razorback Ridge means steep and exposed. 2 things I don't really like that much. I tend to get very jittery around steep and exposed areas. I find myself getting nervous about it. What happened on that Razorback Ridge is okay, my coping strategy was to walk directly behind the guide and get her to talk to me, just distract me. So I'm like, Lisa, this is what I need at the moment. I just need to follow your feet and for you to talk to me about anything. So off we went, and my heart was pounding because we leave this little sort of rocky platform and you go on a narrow path off the side of the cliff edge and follow it around with a big drop off, and then you get onto this very pinnacle-like exposed ridge with drop-offs either side. And so I'm like, ugh. The path was wide enough to stand on. Like, it wasn't like if I had one step off, I'd fall to my death or anything like that. If you had one step off, you'd probably fall a long way. But it was scary, and my heart was pounding. And so we walked about 10 meters, and she said, "Watch your head." And I it registered, and then smacko. I smacked my head on the low-hanging branch. Why? Because I had my head down, focused on my feet. I was not looking up at all. And I sort of fell straight back on my butt and was in a bit of a shock at that moment. She's like, "Oh, I told you about the branch, didn't I? Did I say it?" But I'm like, "You did." And I didn't see it because I was staring down, and it registered somewhere in my brain, but not clearly enough. I'm in very focused survival mode, an amygdala hijack, if you like, which narrows our focus and perspective. And I sat there with my head throbbing, and I just sort of cried a little bit to myself. I felt so sorry for myself. I'm like, I was terrified before, and now I've just smacked my head. And then I thought, this is really useful. It's kind of shocking me out of my reverie, because before going onto the Razorback Ridge, I was getting more and more apprehensive, and my anxiety was riding really high. And I kind of breathed through that and focused on that to realize this is mostly in my head. Everybody else is walking just fine around this, and I am managing just fine to maneuver this technical ridge without any too much drama. And in fact, the pinch points, that like the sketchy bits, were really short, and the rest of it was 5 or 6 meters wide and less scary for me. So I thought about this, and halfway through I realized I should just lighten up and actually enjoy the views, because the views were amazing. And that was kind of an awakening for me too. I'm like, wow, what is this fear stuff? I knew it was a thing for me, like getting nervous about being part of a group or being nervous about being on top of a ridge. It's fear. And I realized that fear is a drama queen. Fear is a drama queen. And my good friend, Dr. Amy Silver, who's been on the show before, talks about, fear being the loudest guest. It serves a purpose. It's there to try and keep us safe. And it's there to accompany us. So I figure if fear is a drama queen, just enjoy the show. And this is an advanced emotional intelligence technique where we can self-observe. And in a couple of interviews coming up, I think it's next week's actually, Luke Mathers of Curious Habits, we talk extensively about this, of being able to self-observe as a way of handling our emotions. And I think this is really useful around fear. Fear is a drama queen. Enjoy the show. And it kind of helped me loosen up a little bit around that particular activity. Now, probably the next bigger insights were around conflict in the group. So people always ask, how was it? I'm like, amazing. And they're like, how was the group? There's a bunch of strangers coming together. You never know if you're going to get along or not. We started with 8 participants and 2 guides. 2 of the guests left after 3 days because her mom was unwell in care, and so they decided they wanted to go spend some time with her mom. So we were 6. 2 from Sydney and 2 from Finley. I think that's right. That's right, Finley. And 1 from Alice Springs proper, and me. And the group was great. I had a great time. The people were really, really fun. And there were 2 moments of conflict. And those 2 moments of conflict centered around me. Oh my God. It still amazes me that this happened, actually. I did not see myself as someone who engages in conflict. I'm really quite conflict averse. So let me tell you about the situations and then what I learned about conflict in general, conflict and authority and purpose in general, and then specifically about me. So here we go. This is like kind of true confessions. Here you go. So the first piece of conflict happened on our longest walking day. We started walking at 5 a.m. because we had 31 kilometers to walk, which is a long way. So we're up at 4, packing up, having breakfast, and leaving at 5. And about, I guess it must have been about 4 hours into it, because the sun had come up and we'd been going for a while. We were bunched together and we were having a conversation about the use of radio language. So UHF radio language. I used radios for 10 years at Outward Bound, and we had very particular radio call sign language, which fits into the universal radio language call signs. So I was discussing the expression over and out, which appears a lot in American movies. And we were taught at Outward Bound, you never say over and out, because in radio conversation, when you say over, it means I've finished talking, it's over to you. And when you're ready to end the call, you just say Zoe out, or use your radio call sign. For me, it was Zulu Hotel out. Finished. I'm not saying anything more. I'm not listening to you anymore. So if you say over and out, it means over to you, and I'm not listening to you anymore. So I was explaining this point to one of my other group members when a different group member completely interrupted in a very loud, commanding voice and says, "That's wrong. That's not at all right. In fact, it's only the commander who gets to use over and out." And then she said some more stuff, which I don't remember, because I was like, what? She just cut me off at the knees. She interrupted me and she told me I was wrong. So you can imagine, alarm bells went off in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I've just been told that I'm completely wrong. My expertise has been undermined. I've been told that my opinion is not worthy. I had all sorts of stuff going on in my head. And I arced up. I reacted. I did not respond. I reacted and I said, well, I was trying to discuss the finer points of the argument, and she was not at all interested in my perspective. And to be honest, I wasn't really interested in her perspective either. And she said, well, we went backwards and forwards, and she said, well, that's incorrect. Like, finished conversation. I said, well, I can assure you that I've used radios for years, and I am completely sure that we use them correctly. Good on me. That was the end of the conversation. So we continued on in silence. I did not discuss anything further with her, nor did she discuss anything further with me. About an hour later, one of the other group members said, so, did you guys sort it out? I'm like, don't go there. I'm not going there. And nor did we go there ever again. But that was the first incident. So let me tell you about the second incident, because it has echoes to the first one. We were sitting around the campfire, and we were having a discussion about what guides should know before they take out leadership groups. And this was based after an observation of a young guide on a different group with a school group. A group of 15-year-old boys were thinking, and a teacher, and my fellow team member or teammate or group mate, fellow guest, had observed what he thought was shocking group management. Some of the kids didn't have hats on. Some of them had exposed arms and had sunburn, which is really poor welfare management. I agreed with him there. And then he got on his high horse. Well, I thought he was getting on his high horse. Let's just put a caveat around that. And he said she was 22. For me, I'm like, so? I was 22 when I led a 6-week canoe trip in Canada. What's that got to do with anything? I thought that was disparaging and ageist. So I took him to task on the age thing. And then he said, well, she hasn't walked the trail before. She would be completely hauled into court if anything went wrong on the program. And I argued the finer points of this. And I said, I don't think so. Like, the skill of an outdoor guide is not having to have walked every trail before you take a group on it. It's about group management and navigation and risk management, etc. Anyway, the more I argued the point, the more irritated and loud he got, and the more I dug in. And I even pulled out this good old chestnut. In my 30 years of experience working in the outdoors, I know this to be true, blah, 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 blah. If you're pulling out that, in my 30 years of experience, you know you've lost the argument, or you've lost the conversation, not necessarily the argument, but the conversation, because you're in amygdala hijack, you are in an aggressive conversation, and it's not constructive anymore. And so I found myself in an amygdala hijack having an aggressive conversation. And he ended it by saying, well, let's agree to differ, which means that's enough. I'm not listening to you anymore. So I sat and marinated in that and stewed on that for a good long time. And the next morning, the same fellow guest came over to me who checked in with me on the previous conflict, said, hey, how'd you go? You got kind of shouted down last night. I'm like, well, I am actually used to men in particular in group settings who have, if their opinions are not accepted immediately, can sometimes just say them louder and with more confidence to try and get their point across. So that part didn't upset the apple cart. I think what upset the apple cart was the fact that I got so reactive. And in both those situations, I had my buttons pushed and I was arguing the toss. And I thought I was telling this to a friend of mine, Nick, and he said, is that out of character for you? I'm like, well, it's out of my usual context. In group settings, I'm usually the facilitator, the trainer, the group leader. And authority has such a different effect on how we show up. Authority allows us to sit in a different layer of confidence and ease. This is what I'm observing about myself in this particular context. When we sit as a member of a group, we do not necessarily have authority. Nor do we necessarily have pecking order or status established in a group like that. And I discovered that I operate differently in that context because it's not often that I am in that context. How do I operate differently? Well, less filters, more at ease, not having to prove anything. And yet, when my expertise was challenged, which it was in both these incidents, my buttons got pressed, which shows that I've got a status hot button. And if you know the work of David Rock, he has the acronym SCARF. And when we have threats to status, to certainty, to autonomy, to relatedness, to fairness, SCARF, we tend to react in a threat-like manner, which is exactly what happened to me in both those contexts. And I thought, wow, okay, I thought I had myself a lot better managed. I wrote a whole book on composure. That was my first book. It was all about how to stay centered when everything else is turning pear-shaped so that you respond rather than react. And here I found myself reacting. So my insights around this were, I still have work to do. I still have work to do, like every other human on the planet, I suppose. The other observation was how much authority can dial up or dial down your sense of centeredness, and how much we can lean on that to push our point or not push our point. That's another insight. And also, the other thing I noticed too around this is the effect of common purpose on a group or a team. And I thought about, how did this group actually work? Were we in fact a team? And my conclusion is, even though I like to call us a team, we were not in fact a team. Each of us had different reasons for being on that trek as a commercial holiday trip. We did not have anything that we were building together except to have an enjoyable experience and enjoy each other's company. We were not constructing anything together. In fact, we were being led by our guides who made most of the decisions for us and provided food and stuff for us. We didn't actually have to operate as a team apart from very loosely. In fact, we didn't always walk together. We had one person who liked to walk really far up the front and another person who walked, it was about three of us who walked pretty quickly up the front. And three of us who didn't. And so we didn't necessarily have to do everything as a team. We were more a group. I think this is a useful leadership question, actually, is to ask yourself in the groups that you find yourself in at work, are you in fact a team with a common purpose? And that has different responsibilities and expectations to it in terms of contributions and roles and sharing and discussion. Or are you in fact a work group? Because the commitments are really different. And I think this affects how we show up and how we respond to particular situations. So the other key insight I would take from the conflict that I experienced, I'm laughing because I didn't see anybody else have any conflict. It was just with me. The other insight I would take is that to try and circuit break the reactivity is, if I find myself having buttons pushed, is to reply with questions. If I'd replied in both of those situations with a question, it might have given me some breathing room to calm my nervous system down. So, with someone saying, that's incorrect, I could have replied saying, oh, why do you think that? And I would be exploring their point of view instead of just nursing my wounded ego. In the second instance, I could say, tell me more about why you think a guide needs to see the entire route before they actually guide it. Tell me more about your point of view around that. What else did you find interesting about that experience? Staying in curiosity and replying with questions is the circuit breaker I'm going to lean on. Breathing and pausing before you respond would be the other. But what amazed me is that discipline had disappeared from my usual practice. And I thought that was kind of weird, actually. And it's something I talked to Luke about in the interview that's coming up on the show. And he said, well, you're also under physical duress, that also affects our ability to stay centered. I'm like, true that. It's pretty worn out in both those situations. Okay, so that was my insight on the Larapinta Trail. It was beautiful. I would go back there in an instant. I'd do it all again. I'm even considering doing it at one stage as an independent walker with some friends. That means carrying all your stuff and being self-organized. So no fancy pants dinners, just what we take with us. I loved it. If you're into bushwalking, then I would highly recommend it. Phew. Let me see. In my reading life, one of the books I read out on the Larapinta was Dark Emu by Brian Pascoe. And this book was amazing. It is all about the misunderstood history of Aboriginal people and how they were not necessarily just nomads, hunter-gatherers. There is clear evidence that there were incidents of agriculture, established villages that were built structures. There was quite a network of, in coastal regions, of fishing mechanisms, like they dug channels and had the whole automated fishing regime down there, managing influx from the seas and so on, and is quite civilized and advanced in certain regards. And the book, it really opens up insights into what kind of civilizations were here before white people arrived. And it just gave me even deeper appreciation for Aboriginal culture and heritage of this most amazing country. And it's so diverse. I mean, Australia is enormous, and its Aboriginal communities are also extremely diverse in languages, some 300 plus different language groups around the country. And the Aranda people from that look after the Larapinta area are amazing for their stewardship of the land and for establishing that walking trail in conjunction with national parks. So that book, Dark Emu, was a really wonderful read, and I enjoyed it immensely. It's probably one of the handful of books that I can point to that actually changed my perspective on things. Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to have your perspective challenged about Aboriginal Australia, then have a read of Dark Emu. And the last little update I'll give you is on Amplifier. So we are currently reviewing it and revamping it. So we've had 3 years of the program. Life, the world, and leaders have changed over the last 3 years, and we're facing a different kind of context. So we're mixing it up a little bit. And this week, this morning, in fact, as you get this episode live, we ran a lead strategy skills development session for people who are interested in upgrading their leadership skills, and showcased Amplifiers as its new platform. So there'll be a 1, 2, 3 year plan. So the idea being that Amplifiers can be a 3-year journey. You start in the first year learning the skills, the advanced leadership training skills that are lead change, culture, strategy, and performance. And the second year is about expedition, which means that you apply the skills in context and learn to use them to adjust to the changing landscape around you. And then the third year is around horizons and building the capability of your team. We are implementing a lot of adult leadership principles, which something that Mick Spears and I talk about. He is on the show coming up as well. He's the founder of the Leadership Project, and he's got a great leadership program. And I have similar leadership principles or adult learning principles applied in Amplifiers. And these are make it flexible so that you can learn where and when you want, that we have micro learning and micro lessons, so you learn and apply one bit at a time. Gamification and accountability, so that we can create a sense of progress and boost up the dopamine sense of satisfaction. And social learning, where you are part of a cohort of peers where you can use them as a sounding board, share your insights, celebrate your successes. So that's Amplifiers. All the details are on the website, and you can go to zoerouth.com, click on programs, click on Amplifiers. We will have quarterly quarterly intakes, uptakes and intakes. And the next one kicks off on the 8th of September. So if you're looking for a great, solid leadership development program and advanced leadership skills, then consider our program. It's newly minted. All right, so to sum up, key insights from the Larapinta in the last couple weeks that I've been away. Fear is a drama queen. Enjoy the show. Tread softly and reply with questions. Lots of good stuff coming up on the show ahead. We've got Luke Mathers, who is the author of Curious Habits. It was such a good conversation. Sophie Wade, who is an expert on power and empathy, and we take a deep dive onto some really meaningful questions. And Mick Spears, who, again, we have a really rich conversation around leadership and how we develop people. In the meantime, also, at the end of July, I'm going skiing because it's skiing over here. It's ski time over here in Australia. And halfway through the original planned skiing time I had, I'm disappearing off to Canada to reunite with my family because my little brother is getting married. So I'm off to Canada for a wedding in the beginning of August. I will be back with a solo-sode on the other side of that. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.